Good morning and welcome back to Wednesday Devos here on our social media pages at Terra Nova North Adams. We took last week off for a very special reason. Last week on the 24th, it was a Wednesday. That was my birthday, and I took the day off. So we're back at it this week. Here's what we're going to do this week. We had an outdoor worship gathering planned for this past Sunday. Weather proved to push us back indoors. And that caused a hiccup in our plans. We weren't able to live stream or anything like that at the last minute. So I'm going to give a recap of what we talked about in our time studying Matthew on Sunday, but because I want you to feel a part of that, but also because we laid out at the end of that a very specific thing that we're going to call our church to this July. So I want to be sure and communicate that with all of you. So this past week on Sunday, we spent time in Matthew 9. It is verses 14 to 17. It's a passage that looks at fasting. It is now the second time in the book of Matthew Jesus has a direct teaching on the discipline or the spiritual exercise of fasting. So here's what we did in brief. I'm going to try to give this to you in like 90 seconds or 2 minutes, and then give you the specific direction for July for our church family. We looked at that passage in Matthew 9. And we defined fasting. Here's how we defined fasting. Fasting is intentionally saying no to something physical. Often we associate that with food, with drink, maybe even sleep. Saying no to something physical for the sake of intentionally saying yes to something spiritual. And most often we associate that with prayer or reading the Bible. Intentionally saying no to something physical for the sake of saying yes to something spiritual. And that yes being Bible reading and prayer, but that's really just a means to an end that we're trying to get to. What we really are wanting to say yes to and receive more of is more of God's felt presence, more of God's answered prayers, and more of God's promises fulfilled in our lifetime. So that's the core of fasting, which when we see that then reveals to us the answer to the question that really is the highlight of the text in Matthew 9, and that is, when should we as believers and disciples of Christ fast, right? If we are saying no to something earthly for the sake of saying yes and pleading with God for more of his felt presence, more of his answered prayers, and more of his fulfilled promises, we should engage the discipline or the act of worship. Fasting is a form of worship. We should be responding to the world around us when God's presence feels lacking, when we want him to answer more of our prayers directly and specifically, and we want more of his promises fulfilled in our lifetime. That's when we as his followers should fast. We want more of his presence felt. We want answers to our prayers, and we want his promises to be fulfilled in our lifetime. That was the core of the message on Sunday. Now, here's where we transition to an introduction, because the reality is, for me personally, I find myself there quite often the past several weeks or months. I want more of God's felt presence. I need more answers to some of the prayers I feel like I've been praying for a while now, and I feel like, God, can you just show up and make good on some of your promises? With so many unknowns in my life, with so many pain points in the community around me, I often am finding myself in my own moments of prayer kind of crying out, God, where are you? God, are you hearing? Can you answer these prayers and lead me? Can you lead our church? And God, can you show up and make good on promises? Like all those promises you have for unity and for love and to make all things new and for Christ to return and restore all things to their right and good order. When I look around the world, I see a lot of pain and brokenness. And I want more of God's promises fulfilled. I want more of his presence felt with me. I want more of my prayers answered. And so we should be a people of fasting. That should be our response. Not to ignore it, not to numb the pain of life, not to just find ourselves into doubt because God continues to be silent or remain distant, but to continue to plead with him through the discipline of fasting, saying no to something physical, the things we often run to for comfort when things are bad, food, sleep, drink, and saying yes to something spiritual because we want more of God. So here's what we're going to do as a church family for at least the month of July. Every Thursday through the month of July, and under the banner of our Drink and Pray, which used to be at our coffee station every Sunday, where we would have something for you to pray for as you got your coffee, we're going to ask our church family to fast together. Now, past sermons, I've given individual guidance, steps, practical guidance on if you want to fast on your own. Here's some good guidance. You can find those videos and those sermons on our website. But for the month of July, we're going to try to do this together, because we feel like we are in a season where we need God's guidance. We need God's provision for us individually and for our church family. It is really difficult for us to remain doing life together, loving one another, encouraging one another, exhorting one another, all of those things, as we feel so distant geographically and unable to gather in mass. So Thursdays through July, every morning on our social media, on our website, there will be a post. It'll be a guide for your time of prayer that Thursday. We are asking everybody at Terra North Adams to pick a meal on Thursday that you will fast from. It could be one, it could be two, it could be all three. And please pick one of those meals. Please take the guide. Spend that time you would have done eating, going through that guide, praying, reading the scriptures that we'll give you. We're going to have a Facebook group specifically for this, so we can communicate the information there, that you can interact with others there. We're not asking you to do this alone. We want you to do this together, even though you'll be separate. And so that's the big call for us as a church family this July. Can we together, as we see throughout the scriptures, come together and pray and fast, so that we as a people and as a church family can have more of God's felt presence. He can answer more of our prayers and lead us into where he wants us to go in the future. And can he make good on all those promises that he's made? And can we plead with him to do those things? So we're going to try to do this together as a church family. You'll hear more about this in your email and on the website and social media and all that stuff. But that's where we're going for the month of July. I'd really encourage you to join us. If you have any questions on this, please email me, paul@terranovachurch.org. Love you all. Can't wait to see you soon.